When we had a briefing last time, with regards to the operation, there were smaller towns which fell under our national defense forces. Since then, there are major developments regarding the operation. Now there are larger towns like Aksum, Adwa, and Adigrat, which have now been unfettered from the hands of the TPLF leadership and our National Defense Force, now leaving behind these major towns, which are literally Tigray region. Next to these towns, there is only one major city, which is Mekelle. So by and large, now the Tigray region is under the control of our defense forces. And now it's moving forward to Mekelle, as you might have heard yesterday, which was disclosed by the Prime Minister and the armed forces. Mekelle is now being encircled in the range of about 50 to 60 kilometers. And you might also have seen or witnessed the photo and the video shots regarding the towns which have been fallen under the hands of our National Defense Forces, particularly the Aksum town, which is actually ransacked and devastated by the fleeing special forces and militia of TPLF. They've attacked and destroyed partially the tower of the airport. They also destroyed the runway by dozers, and they destroyed some of the equipments and also the properties of the Aksum town, which actually could be rehabilitated, but the intent of ruining and destroying cities and towns would depict how reckless and ruthless this team is against its own people, against its own country, how it doesn't hesitate to destroy what comes before it unless it rules it, unless it uses it, unless it remains under its control, then so it shows its determination to destroy whatever is under its disposal. That's why the Prime Minister yesterday had to issue an ultimatum of 72 hours to let the people of Mekelle understand that the beginning of the end is within reach, and that our defense forces have now effectively encircled Mekelle, and now it is easy to target any military installations which are hidden in any places. But again, the reason for the Prime Minister to issue the ultimatum and to let the people of Mekelle understand the reality is that because the people have been being informed a false and a hoax story that still the gang is controlling the entire Tigray region except the peripheries, and that it can still defeat the National Defense Forces, that it can still wrest back the areas which it has lost, showing that sporadic throw of rockets to Bahadar and Gondar, they think it was tantamount to challenging and checking the progress of the National Defense Forces. That we know is not the case, even though they throw here and there and now and then some rockets. Writ large, Tigray particularly was defined by major towns like Aksum, Adigrat, and Adwa. Then once they have fallen under the hands of our defense forces, the group actually is now limited to Mekelle, and then it's a group of Mekelle. Otherwise, it does not control the whole Tigray. So the people of Tigray and the people of Mekelle now must understand that it's high time to say enough is enough, and then to save their lives, to save the city, to save the region, because the forces are actually known to hide their armaments and some of their instruments to say they actually had in their control. And the schools, universities, churches, and mosques and in villages which are highly populated, because any attack on either of these targets would inflict larger damage either on sacred places or on the population. Given the facts that how they destroyed Aksum Airport, then we have enough reason to be afraid that they would do the same to derelict and also to destroy the sacred places of Mekelle. So that's why the people have to know to think about their issues, because in some of the towns which our defense forces have captured, the people in the towns, one, they've been handing over back the weapons they were armed, they were given by the forces to attack our defense forces. Now they changed their mind, and then now they are handing over the arms to our defense forces. And then now they're also pointing out some hideouts of areas with militia and the special forces for our national defense forces. So having seen these factors, the Mekelle people could also do the same. That means they have to save their lives, they have to save their city and also their region by saying enough to this group and then handing over to the government so that the lasting peace process would kick in. The other aspect, what remains is that since the rehabilitation process for even for those special forces and militia in the towns which have already been fallen under defense forces, to rehabilitate these militia forces to pacify themselves and then to assume their daily and peaceful life with the community. So elders, religious leaders have begun playing their role to actually rehabilitate these uses. That could also be done in Mekelle once the handing over of the forces who are hiding in Mekelle has been done. The other issue is the talking of this the agenda on peaceful, lasting peaceful mechanism. Last time, as you might have heard, the AU chair, the South African president, decided to send some envoy to Ethiopia. So the government actually made it clear that the Prime Minister would receive and talk to these envoys as a matter of respect for African initiative and the African leaders. But again, because facts on the ground have now changed and have come to their very end, there could be several scenarios, mechanisms whereby the lasting peace issue could be discussed about, but not with this particular group, because this particular group has now become fugitive and actually remained in Mekelle, because by and large most of Tigray have now fallen under the hands of our defense forces. There are a number of pressure groups, elders, religious leaders, civil societies could also discuss about the mechanisms, the ways as to how to bring about lasting peace in Tigray, and the ways and mechanisms as to how quick the ringleaders and the gang of which the arrest warrant have issued could surrender to our defense forces, and then the lasting peace could be possible through a number of initiatives and dialogues. So the Prime Minister would receive this envoy in the coming couple of days, and all possible scenarios will be on the table to talk, except the bringing the gang to the table as a legitimate entity. Otherwise, other options would be possible for discussion. So these were the major development issues since we had our second briefing.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll give you a brief update regarding the ongoing operations from the perspective of law enforcement agencies. So as you all know, currently there is a massive law enforcement operation that is going on in the northern part of the country. And this law enforcement operation is being undertaken within a framework of a state of emergency. So first, I would like to highlight why there is a need for such for such an operation, why there is a need for a state of emergency, and what are the laws that we believe have been violated by criminal elements within the TPLF. Based on our investigation so far and based on the facts that are very obvious to everyone, the pronouncements, statements, conduct, and decisions of several top leaders of the TPLF constitute serious and grave crimes under the laws of the land. I would highlight only some of these crimes in relation to which we are conducting investigation. Some of this conduct and decisions and pronouncements we believe might constitute high treason under the criminal code issued in 2004. We also believe that the attack against the Northern Command and several of its outposts could constitute the crime of impairing the defensive power of the state. We also believe that these acts could constitute armed rebellion under the definition of the Criminal Code of 2004. We also believe that some of these subsequent conduct of these individuals could constitute attacks against the political integrity of the state under the same criminal code. Furthermore, a fifth offense could be outrage against the Constitution under the same code. And many of the acts, including the rocket attacks against Gondar, at Bahardar as well, could constitute acts of terrorism, which is a crime under Article 261 of the Criminal Code. So this is not necessarily an exhaustive list of provisions of the Criminal Code and other relevant criminal laws that are at play in relation to this law enforcement operation. But these are some of the most serious and grave offenses that we believe have been committed in the past couple of weeks, and also prior to the attack against the Northern Command. As you well know, Mr. Seko Toure, one of the senior spokespersons of the TPLF, has gone out on Dimtsa Wayane, a media outlet run by the TPLF, and has publicly admitted that the attack against the Northern Command was committed by, was organized and was conducted by the TPLF and forces loyal to the TPLF in what he styled as anticipatory self-defense, and also another interesting term he used was lightning strike. So by now it's on public record and it's very obvious that TPLF has organized and synchronized these attacks, but our investigation is not only limited to the attack against the Northern Command, but it also covers subsequent acts and statements and decisions of the TPLF leadership. It also encompasses within its scope some of the decisions of the TPLF leadership prior to the attack against the Northern Command. This investigation is being conducted by the federal police and federal prosecutors. So far, a number of suspects have been identified and arrest warrants have been issued by federal courts. The investigations are still going on. And in these ongoing investigations, the number of suspects that have been identified are around 167. These are the suspects that have been identified by the federal police in collaboration with federal prosecutors. In relation to this investigation, due to their the support that they have provided for the TPLF leadership and due to their extensive and well-known links with criminal elements within TPLF, the accounts and assets of 38 companies have been frozen. Taking into account the significant number of employees that these companies have, and also their economic role, federal courts, we expect, will be assigning trustees to administer these companies and to ensure that their day-to-day operation will not be disrupted. So the freezing order that was issued by federal prosecutors for 48 hours and that has been subsequently approved by federal courts would preclude these companies from transferring their assets or being able to support criminal elements within TPLF. Furthermore, there have been credible intelligence reports and tips coming from the public at large as well that there could be terrorist attacks that could be staged by the TPLF within Addis Ababa and other parts of the country. Considering what has been done by TPLF, the rockets launched against Bardar, Gondar, it wouldn't come as a surprise if there are such threats and reports in relation to Addis Ababa. And as preventive and precautionary measures, the federal police and the Addis Ababa police are taking several measures. These preventive and precautionary measures take into account and try to vet the information, the inputs, and the tips that they receive from the public at large, and also other credible intelligence sources. So the objective of these precautionary measures is to neutralize the threats and networks, the threats posed by TPLF and the terror network of TPLF that might be operating in Addis Ababa, those who might be intent on or planning to carry out acts of sabotage on behalf of the TPLF. In relation to these precautionary measures, the Addis Ababa police in particular has been conducting some search and conducting some investigations, and in relation to this investigation, around 343 suspects have been detained. Out of these detainees, around 116 suspects have been released on bail in accordance with the rulings of the relevant courts. One thing that I would like to highlight in relation to these precautionary measures and investigations that are being conducted in Addis Ababa is that there have been complaints in relation to abuses or excesses that might have occurred as a result of this operation. These are complaints we take very seriously. We understand that there could be isolated incidents. There could also be instances where police officers and law enforcement personnel might have acted out of line, out of bounds. So taking these concerns into account, the federal police and the Addis Ababa police are setting up a complaint handling mechanism. They will be announcing dedicated hotlines and desks to receive complaints so that anyone who would like to lodge complaints regarding the behavior, the conduct of law enforcement personnel. It could be how they have behaved, or it could be someone claiming that they are being searched or they are being targeted for these investigations without due cause. They could lodge their complaints through these mechanisms. we're doing everything within our power to ensure that there would not be arbitrary and discriminatory measures, and this is something that the government denounces. As you might have followed, several statements that have been issued by the administration, particularly the Prime Minister's office, has called upon the public and government agencies to ensure that there will not be discriminatory and arbitrary conduct on our part. In line with these statements and in the spirit of these statements, to ensure that this kind of conduct will not become a pattern, to ensure that the necessary corrective and remedial measures will be taken, the details of the complaint handling mechanisms, the numbers of the dedicated hotlines will be announced by the Federal Police and the Addis Ababa Police. Finally, I'd also like to communicate to you that our investigation, we have deployed federal prosecutors and investigators, investigative police personnel have been deployed to the northern part of Ethiopia to investigate reports of atrocities that have been committed according to some reports. For instance, according to the report by Amnesty International, in places like Maikadra by militia and special forces loyal to the TPLF. So we are at an early stage of our investigation. I can't provide much detail except to say that this is an investigation we'll take very seriously. That will be done with the utmost care. And as soon as we have further details, we will communicate those details to the public and to the press. We understand that the Human Rights Commission is conducting its own independent fact-finding mission and investigation. Our investigation is separate. Ours is a criminal investigation that is geared at identifying who did what, when, and we would also like to identify who gave the order, how high does the chain go up, and based on the findings of the team that has been deployed to investigate this matter, we'll make the final determination as to what kind of charge we would press and who will be the individual suspects. This is it from my side. I'll try to address other issues you might raise through the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Two questions. So the Prime Minister has given an ultimatum for 72 hours. And the question is, I think what everybody's asking, and I'm sure you've seen this, what will happen after 72 hours? There is a notion that maybe there will be heavy bombing, civilians are scared and all that. What will happen? Then you also keep saying the civilians should serve themselves. What does this mean? The people of Mekele should save themselves? Could just, let's get a clarification. Then finally, there are foreigners that are reportedly stuck in Mekele. I don't know if that has come as a consideration while the operation is going on. Thank you.
Individuals have been detained and deported from other countries related with the current situation. And is there any information regarding these issues?
This is a final number, and I was wondering if you could also tell us how many of these individuals have already been arrested. Thank you.
So there are certain individuals whose extradition we might seek from other countries, but as far as my information goes, those extradition requests have not been granted until now. So this will be an ongoing process. These things are in their very nature very lengthy, very bureaucratic, so they might take some time before we have any final answer on extradition requests. So those are still at their early stages, those are pending. So out of 167 individuals who are on the list of suspects issued by the federal police, there are several who have already been apprehended, mainly military personnel, certain officers within the army, in relation to whom we have every reason to believe that they have received orders of the TPLF and they have collaborated in the commission of the crimes that I have stated earlier. The numbers are not final. So as I have said, this is an ongoing investigation, and depending on the additional information we get, the number of suspects might increase, and that will be communicated to the public as we go along.
All right. There are 3 questions forwarded to me. One is with regards to what will happen after the 72 hours ultimatum actually passed. Our hope is the people of Mekelle will understand that actually Mekelle is now surrounded, and that for 50, and it may actually be less than 50 kilometers range, that anything can happen. Now the thing is, we believe they are being fed with a false and a hoax news that the TPLF forces are still challenging the National Defense Forces, and now they have effectively checked the National Defense Force from advancing towards Mekelle. But now when the people of Mekelle would be led to understand that is not the case, and actually the truth is that Mekelle is encircled, then they can make their mind to take a positive and a decisive action. If you have seen the progress when our National Defense Force have been capturing the cities and towns, what it used to do is to let the city alone, and then to make a big turnaround to surrounding the cities, so that it can cut off the militia and special force of TPLF from its command force and then from its routes. Once that happens, the case was the city dwellers actually used to approach our National Defense Forces and then giving their armaments which they were supplied to attack the very National Defense Force, and actually also to force the militia and special forces of the TPLF to surrender themselves to our National Defense Force. So what happened was, without the towns and cities being attacked, by just cutting off the route of the command force, and then the special force and the militia actually were melted away, mingling with the community, having or leaving their arsenals. Now what follows then is to have a rehabilitation process to give them confidence so that they can join the community and then pursue their peaceful life, and then to take their arms away from the special force and militia and to hand over to our National Defense Forces. Our hope is once the Mekelle people would understand that it is actually encircled in that very short radius, then they can do the same what other cities have been doing in Tigray region. The other fear is that we have a hunch, given the fact that the TPLF forces have committed irreverence for our sacred places like mosques and churches, they can still use that egregious act on the mosques and the churches of Mekelle again. Again, given the fact that it's been destroying the bridges, now I think as of yesterday we had about 6 bridges which have been destroyed, a number of roads across the way. Then, given what happened to Aksum Airport, these forces could actually turn on Mekelle itself, so they may destroy the city. When our general was saying that it was within the range of a tank, what he meant was when the defense forces were capturing other cities and towns, they didn't have to pass through the cities. They have to make a big detour, actually, to go for rugged terrains. Now, that terrain is actually passed. They don't have to climb mountains and hills, because all the mountains, hills now have been left behind our National Defense Force, and what remains is a plain land, which is easier for tankers. So he was just explaining the facts that we have actually overcome the difficult task of moving to the rugged terrain. Now we are on the plain land, so it's easier for us. That was one fact. The other fact which he meant was that Mekelle is within the range of a tank, which means military-wise, it is easier to strike. That's the simple fact. The other aspect is to let the people that once that happens, then it's human that people would take a right choice, a choice which saves themselves, a choice which saves their future. So once they are let to know what is happening, what is actually a brute truth, then they will turn for their succor, which is recording for the rational choice of pushing these forces away and now saving their city and their future. That was an advice. So by providing a brute fact, it's letting people to understand the reality and then make a right choice. What will happen after the 72 hours ultimatum is passed, I think, is we hope people will understand the reality. Then they can tell the hoax which they were being fed by the TPLF and the reality which is at their doorsteps, and then they can understand and choose and take the right action, like other dwellers of Aksum, Madigrat, and Adwa have actually taken. If that won't be the case, it's just an if, it's a wild guess. What might happen is there are a number of targets now the TPLF forces have used as a hideout and also to put their arsenals. Maybe very small, as an indicative, as a symptom of what has been said could also be done. So maybe a very specific target could be hit so that people would understand. So what was said was actually true, and then move for their right direction. So we hope people would choose, because they are smart people. Once they are given the right information, they will decide the right thing, and government would actually keep on hoping that Mekelle would be saved. So to save yourself and to save your city means by alienating themselves, they can leave the city if they wish to the suburbs and periphery, whereby the ringleaders would be left alone. So that could be also an option. They can inform to our defense forces where the actual leaders are actually hiding out and where the actual armaments are put, so that they could be a precise strike on the city and then now to engulf the city. So the Mekelle people would have a number of choices to collaborate with national defense forces to avoid any strike, because the slightest strike is a loss for us. Even if we hit one school, even if we hit one residence, even if we hit one road, it's a loss. So by collaborating, we can save the city and also one life, because now they are hiding out in a densely populated city. The slightest strike would end up losing lives or properties or sacred places. So we can avoid that by collaborating. That's what it means, and I think we still keep on believing that Mekelle people would do that. Foreigners who choose to be living in Mekelle, they're actually leaving Mekelle in their hundreds. It's been a week since a number of embassies, UN agencies have been evacuating their employees and also their staffs through Samara, which is Afar region. Today, I think, yesterday evening, one plane arrived having UN agency staffs and other embassy staff members. This morning, I think, there is another plane, so it keeps on coming. There are a number of safe corridors to just transport people from Mekelle and Tigray to Afar area. They do it on their own. Now it becomes easier because a number of areas are now liberated, and then it's only Mekelle. So once they leave Mekelle, then it becomes easier for the government to escort and usher in any requests which are coming. I think these were questions that were raised, and thank you for today.